Thank you. No one mentioned TMZ either. There's some good stuff on TMZ. And I'm on it as often as I can get on there. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about the terminology that we use, because I think this is one of the things that's really impeding the way forward, and get your insight on all this. The first is, now I've had people come up to me and say, well, everybody spies on everyone, but this is not really about espionage. Certainly not in the traditional sense. This is not, I mean, there may be elements that involve espionage, you know, hacking a computer, getting into a system, a network, and stealing emails and the like, but this is not really an espionage situation. The other term that's always thrown around is collusion, and there's ongoing efforts to answer all those questions, but this sort of thing doesn't really involve, or doesn't really require collusion. You don't need the cooperation of a political candidate or party to be able to do any of this. In fact, many of the ads that were pulled down yesterday have nothing to do with a candidate or a party in the short term, and it isn't even quite clear what the psychology behind it is, other than to get us to fight against each other. So if you can just if people would just put aside the whole espionage focus and put aside, you know, the collusion focus and let that be dealt with the way it's being dealt with, we get left with the term interference, and that's become such a generic term that it almost sounds benign. You know, interference sounds like everything from the leadership of another country had a preference about who won the election to actually like actively engaged in helping somebody get elected. And I would hope, and maybe you disagree, I hope you agree, this is more than that. This is really nothing less than informational warfare. This is just another type of warfare to weaken an adversary, and that's how Vladimir Putin views the United States of America. So, for example, if he conducted a kinetic strike, a military strike to take out anti-air defenses, he would do so to weaken our air defenses. And if they conducted a cyber attack to knock out our command and control, he's there to weaken our communication systems or our electrical grid. And if you do this, you do it in order to weaken our society, our willingness and capacity to fight, to work together, to come together as a nation. This is part of their broader doctrine on how to confront an adversary. And on the escalation scale, it costs very little money. You can do it with limited attribution, and it works, because the fact of the matter is, with all the things happening in the world today, the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence has spent an inordinate amount of time on this important topic, and there are so many other issues we could be focused on. So it's worked to some extent. Is this assessment of it right? This is not interference. This is information warfare designed to sow division and conflict and doubts about, because whether it involves changing voter registration databases in the future at some point potentially, or the stuff we're seeing now, all of that is designed to sow chaos, instability, and basically to get us to fight against each other. We're already fighting against each other in this country. All this does is just sort of stir that up even more. Is that an accurate assessment? Is this informational warfare?
I agree 100%.
So to the extent that it is, and I think everybody's already asked you this question, but wouldn't one of the best things that could happen is that we can focus all day on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. These are ultimately platforms who are being used for informational warfare. I don't believe they invited them in, and there are things they can do to improve their processes, and I wish their disclosures were a little faster. But by and large, they're a platform that's being used. It would be like blaming the road builders because some enemy used that road that they built to put their tanks into your country. So there are things these folks can be doing to improve the way they operate, no doubt about it. But ultimately, we really should be focused on what's being done and not only who they're using to do it. And so my question is, why wouldn't these social media pages be in a position to potentially alert all of their users of not just a public disclosure like they did yesterday in a press conference, but actively send out to all of its users alerts about every time they remove something, so that people can become conditioned to the sort of messages that are being driven by these informational warfare operations?
I believe they can. I believe Senator Blumenthal requested that they do so in response to back in September after the first set of hearings. They did push notifications to people saying that they had seen content, they had liked a page, they had engaged. I believe Twitter sent out emails to users who were affected. That kind of disclosure is absolutely necessary, because one thing that it does is it comes from a platform that is at least seen as somewhat trustworthy, whereas if they hear it from the media, you see these polarized echo chambers where some people don't even believe this is happening.
Senator, I would just add that
one of the things we know from looking at both the history of active measures as well as their use across Eastern Europe and Central Europe is that sunlight is one of the most effective antidotes. Transparency, exposure of this activity is critical for both building resiliency and deterring it going forward. And so I absolutely concur that the more information, the more transparency that the platforms can be providing to their consumers, to the users of information about these activities is absolutely critical.
And I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that it's great that Facebook put this stuff out there and that we're having this hearing. I promise you, the vast majority of people that I know back home will never see a single one of these images because there's a lot going on in the news every day, constantly by the hour.
Senator